Hey, this is Michael Zwick from If Not For God with Mike Zwick. I've actually got the associate pastor with Pastor Henry Schaefer himself. And so if Pastor Henry is not there preaching, and what's the name of the church?
It's University Parkway Church of God.
And it's in Aiken, South Carolina?
Yeah, and we go by Freedom Church of God a lot, you know.
Okay.
I mean, the university is the actual name, but a lot of us call it Freedom Church because that's where you go to get freedom.
You go to get freedom.
If you know Henry Schaefer, you know you're going to get some freedom. Yeah, I was telling Connie that, that I feel so blessed because so many people, they see the videos and stuff and they just want a minute or two with Pastor Schaefer. Mm-hmm. And I get to hang with them, and I get to be with them, get to sit under his wisdom. And so I'm a very blessed man. And of course we do the deliverance ministry and stuff like that.
You guys do a deliverance ministry?
Yeah, can you believe that? Yeah, and which is funny because for years I always said Christians can't have demons.
Yeah. That's what I was always taught.
Until I had about 50 or 60 of them come out one Sunday morning, then I realized, well, maybe there is something to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking about what we're going to talk about. And I was talking about Revelation 21:4, where it talks about that God Himself is going to wipe away all our tears. Mm-hmm. And every tear, I believe, has a story. Mm-hmm. And I see so many people's stories. Mm-hmm. I've seen women that have been raped 4 times. Uh-huh. I've seen, moms that hated their children, and their children grow up in this circumstance, and you'll be doing a deliverance, and all of a sudden a spirit will come up. They don't know where it came from, and it'll be a little child. And they'll start talking like a child. They'll start looking like a child. Mm-hmm. They'll start crying with the tears of a child that has been hurt and abused, Mm-hmm. And you can see an adult come in, their husband is not treating the way that they should be treated. You see those tears. Those tears are telling you a story that I hurt. I feel rejected. I feel abandoned. I feel like my mom didn't care about me. I feel like my dad didn't care about me. There's a death in the family, and they're trying to handle that death. Yeah. And those tears tell you the story that, the person that I loved on this earth has passed away. They come in, they have tears of addiction. I've spent my life, I've lost my family, I've lost my children because of the addiction, and the tears tell the story. God knows every one of those tears, and He knows every one of those stories. And so when you start looking at it that way, and people start wanting you to take them through deliverance. People have a weird idea about deliverance. They think deliverance is going to make you climb the walls and run the ceiling. I've had that. I had a young girl that she was biting me. I didn't realize she was biting me. I had a thick sweater on. And all of a sudden, I'm taking through deliverance. All of a sudden, I feel her biting me. Uh-huh. And I said, not today. Sat back in the name of Jesus. And she sat back and she jumped up and she ran. And we had some beanbag chairs in the youth room. She got tangled up in that. We just went over and continued taking her through deliverance. I noticed this weekend she's here. And she was here doing deliverance. So God saw the tear of that young girl, that she was being tormented by these things, and He knows the story. And there's going to come a day when she'll be in heaven, and God Himself will take His thumb and just wipe that tear off. Isn't that something?
That is something else.
Yeah, think about the tears that you've seen, the tears that you've cried.
Right.
God knows every one of those tears. He's seen them all. I was at church one day and I was crying. I was at the front crying out to God. My phone goes off, it rings. And when it does, it says, I see your tears and I hear you. I come to find out it was another pastor that the Lord told him to write that at that moment. That he saw my tears.
That's right.
And it's just unbelievable. We get so wrapped up in doctrine. We get so wrapped up in, well, I think it's this way. People are hurting. I was a sheriff's chaplain for 5 years, and I would always get called out on the death scenes, Mm-hmm. Never got called out to introduce a baby,
Yes,
It was always being called out into a desperate situation, and I would walk in, I had a sheriff's badge, and it had a white cross on it. When I'd walk into that situation, I'd say, "Hi, I'm the sheriff. I'm the chaplain with the sheriff's department. What can we do?" Or I'd say, their loved one's just been found dead. I'd say, "I'm sorry to tell you that your husband's been found dead." And it sounds harsh, but you want to use a word when you're telling somebody that their loved one has passed. You want to say dead. And I know that from experience, because when my dad died, we had a room full of people. They came in and said that William expired. Well, at the time, it didn't even dawn on me what expired meant. So I'm like, well, he'll be okay, and everything else. And here he's dead, and everybody else is crying. They're bawling. I'm thinking, what's going on? And because I'm not crying, they give me this load of stuff. His clothes and blood clothes and all this. It's handed to me, and I'm like standing in the hospital thinking, what is going on? So we use terms like, your husband is dead, and then all of a sudden, there's all this activity in the room, but they see that white cross on the police shield, and they knew I was there for the peace. I wasn't there for the rest. I wasn't there for anything else but to try to bring peace into that situation. That's what God has called us all to do.
Yeah.
We do it different. Everybody does it different. Even deliverance ministers do it different. But it's not our job to criticize how this one does it or this one does it. It's our job to try to, as Pastor Henry is doing, to get the community of the church to come together to be the bride that's spotless, and to do it, to show love. Like your last guest was talking about, show the love of God in people's lives. There's enough people out there being hurt, and so that's why that's my favorite verse, is because everybody has a story. Everybody has tears, and it's not always sad tears. Sometimes it's happy tears.
Right.
Your daughter gets married, and all of a sudden, you're happy and you're crying, and my daughter's gotten married, and then it dawns on you, my daughter's gotten married. That little baby that I had at one time, she's leaving the house, and I don't have her anymore. And so then she leaves the house, and you've got that story of the tears of happiness that became sadness. And I was just, one day I was reading that, and I thought, God, every story. And the greatest story ever told was that Jesus Christ died and gave his life for you. But there's going to be a new greater story than that. It's going to be the day that he comes back.
Yeah.
And we get resurrected. And then God wipes all those tears. He said, you don't need to remember his crucifixion anymore. You don't need to remember the abandonment. You don't need to remember the hurt. You're in my presence now for eternity.
Right.
If that's not a great story, then I don't know what a great story is.
Well, you were talking about unity, and it says in Psalm 133, verse 1, it says, how good and pleasant it is when God's people live together in unity. But, you would think that if people are, believing the Bible, Jesus did deliverance. He told us to do deliverance, that people would be excited about it. But Pastor Henry and your church has received some blowback. Is that right?
Yeah. Again, I think there's pastors going to see this, other pastors are going to see this. I think there's two truths to it. One is, when I know something, then I become responsible for it. So if I reject something, I don't have to be responsible for it. And I think there's a lot of pastors that in their heart, they know that there's more than what they're teaching, but they're afraid that when they say it, they become responsible for it. And I say that because my wife, for instance, we were married. She wasn't saved. One night in our bedroom, I said, honey, when are you going to accept Christ? We've been married for a couple of years. She said, you've never asked me to get saved. And I thought to myself, why would I not ask the person I love the most to be saved? And then I realized, she lives with me. she'd see me. She'd know how I act. If I ask her to be saved, she gets saved, and then she knows what I really am supposed to look like. And I had to take responsibilities.
Right.
So I think that when it comes to deliverance, a lot of pastors are scared because they have to take responsibility then and be responsible to do the deliverance, And when I, used to be if I had someone come up and they say, oh, I'm addicted to so-and-so, I would have called out the spirit of addiction, and I would have shouted and hooped and howled and said, oh, I changed his whole life, man. But now we've learned that they'll probably just go back into it because there's another spirit here trying to capitalize on that spirit here, It's like you let one cat in your door and leave your door open. If there's a whole bunch of cats around, they're going to come in too, And so I believe that pastors are afraid of that they become responsible, because if they become responsible for it and they're not doing it, then their church looks at them and says, why aren't you doing what you're supposed to do?
Yes.
And I think some pastors are afraid that if they accept the fact that deliverance is real and the people in the church disagree with it, now their money's gone. We live in a very realistic world, where money makes the world go around, and fortune and fame and all that other stuff. But unity doesn't come that way. Unity comes when I love you and you love me. The most endearing thing about the deliverance that I went through, and I went through deliverance, like I said, I had about probably 50. I went to deliverance. There were so many people at my deliverance that we could have had a pizza party, And I'm having things like slothfulness come out. I'm having things like incest come out, and sometimes it's in the family line and you don't understand why it's coming out. But there was a young lady sitting next to me. I'm just not running on my face. I'm spitting in a bucket, and she's sitting there wiping it all off, making sure that I don't have to be embarrassed. If that's not an endearing thing, But pastors, they don't see the endearing part. A lot. I don't want to say all pastors, but a lot of pastors, they don't see the endearing part because they have been trained to be, I've got to be in charge of everything. I've got to do everything. I can't be human. And in order to be in a deliverance ministry, you got to be human, and you got to understand that people hurt, and you got to understand that sometimes all a person really needs is someone to come up alongside. When they say, you sit down in this chair, you're taking authority over the devil. Me being there, taking you through deliverance, is not me having all this power. It's me being your cheerleader, because you've already taken the authority. You've already done what you needed to do. I'm just here to call up the different demonic spirits in your life and to cheer you on. Say, you know what? Christ gave us this authority. It's not because we're magic. It's not because of anything else. He gave us the authority. Let's call it out, because if we don't, it's going to make your life miserable. You're going to be in torment. And who wants someone that you love to be in torment?
That's right.
I didn't want my wife, when I found out I had not asked my wife to accept Christ as her Savior, I don't want her to be in torment. I love that woman.
Right. Right.
And so Henry Schaefer has been a big influence in my life, because when it first happened, it was kind of funny. About a month or so, I'll say this, and then I'd be sitting there. He'd be teaching. When it broke out in 2015, it really broke out one Sunday, the first Sunday of the year. We had about 4 or 5 people manifesting in church. None of us knew what was going on except Henry Schaefer. One lady's face was going like this, and another guy saying he's God Almighty, and And so a few weeks after that, pastor's preaching, and he's preaching on the power of God, and I'm sitting there. We had altars at the time, thinking, I'll pick that altar up and I'll whack you across the head with it and show you how powerful you are. And then I said to myself, wait a minute, I love this guy. Why am I thinking these thoughts? Something is not right. And then my wife had him pray for her, and my immediate thoughts were, what kind of stuff is she telling him about me? Mm-hmm. And then, Pastor has a saying, if you're willing to come out from behind your fig leaf, and be open to God. And so that's when he wanted all the staff to go through deliverance. And he was kind of loud with deliverance, come on, yeah. And I'm not a loud person. Matter of fact, I get accused all the time of talking so soft, and I hope I'm not talking too soft. But he wanted us all to go through deliverance and stuff, where Dr. Fent is a very calm person. And I thought, well, I'll go with Dr. Fent, and we'll just go in a little private room, and I'll say a few things, and it'll be done. And so we're sitting in church that one day, and I'm just having a love time with God, and I write on a piece of paper, God, I love you so much. I'll do whatever you want when you want it. And at that moment, Pastor Schaefer said, if you're here and you're struggling with suicide, it's your time to come out. And I had this little limerick thing that would go through my mind. Tick tock, you pull the trigger at 12 o'clock. And it would go for years. I would just have to fight this thing that would come. And I knew this was going to be different. I can't just go up here and he's just going to, come out. I knew it was going to be stressful. So I go up to him, and he says, brother, do you want me to take you in a soft voice, you want me to take you in another room and do, just us? And I said, no, if I'm going to be a leader of the church needs to see that I have fallibilities and that I can overcome them. So we go over to the side, and he starts taking me through deliverance. And I'm telling him, Pastor, I can't do this. My whole body's hot. I can't do this. I can't do this. He said, it'll be just a minute, Bill, and it'll be okay. And then all of a sudden, he started calling this stuff out. I'm trying to pull my shirt off. I think they thought I was trying to undress because I was so hot. And Lynn is sitting there, and she's wiping the snot out of my nose, and such an endearing thing for about 30, 40 minutes at that time. I'm going through deliverance, and I felt so weak and so clean when I got done. And of course, we've gone through deliverance several times since then, because sometimes you have to go back, But that's ingrained in my mind forevermore, that people love me enough to sit with me, to call things out, and to see God's power in my life. If pastors could look at it in that direction rather than look at it as my church is not. We had 70 people walk out of the church when Pastor first started teaching deliverance, and then never missed a beat with finances or anything. God just kept everything going, brought in new people, God can do anything. And his desire, like you said, is unity in the church.
Yeah.
But we let about 5%, I don't have statistic on it, but about 5% of differences divide all these churches. They believe so much of the same thing, but a pastor gets in his mind, I know it all. You don't know it all.
Yeah.
Nobody. Henry Schaefer does not know it all. And he's one of the smartest pastors that I know. Greg Locke doesn't know it all. Nobody knows it all, but all of us have a piece.
Yeah.
All of us preach differently. It's so funny, at our church, Henry Schaefer gets so loud. His brother TD is hilarious and loud, and he makes the point come through. And I get accused all the time of being too calm and speaking too soft.
Right.
So we all got a part in that unity of the church.
But God is bringing it all together. And so one of the things that, if you're listening right now, and Pastor Bill, thank you for coming on, but one of the things that I want you to hear at what he said is this, is that all of us have a fig leaf over us, in a sense, right? We all are covering something up. We all want something hidden because we don't like exposure. But the Bible says that the light shines in the darkness, and that the darkness will not overcome it. And if we're willing to be exposed, if we're willing to let the Lord do a work in our lives, He can do some amazing things. Is that right?
And He desires to do it.
He desires to do it.
Amen.
Well, God bless you, Pastor
Thank you
Bill.
so much. I
Thanks.
enjoyed this.